Hi, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Cosmic Conversations. I am your host, Marla Martenson, and today I have a fascinating guest, Dr. Jeff Spiess. He has spent his medical career with people facing serious illness and death, and he wrote this fascinating new book, Dying with Ease. So first as an oncologist and then as a hospice physician, he's lectured extensively and has been recognized as a leader in the field of end-of-life care. And he's observed through extensive clinical experience and innumerable conversations with the dying and those caring for and about them, the burden of unnecessary and unavoidable suffering and distress. So welcome, Dr. Spiess. Thanks for being with me.
It's a delight, Marla. I'm happy to be here.
Yes, and this subject is so fascinating to me. I've always wanted to be a hospice volunteer. I do Reiki and energy healing, and I did train to do it at one point, but the people were too far out of my area and it just didn't come to fruition. But and then my husband and some friends would say, but isn't that morbid? How could you do it? How could you handle it? And just talk a little bit about how you decided to do this and your feelings about it and experience.
Well, it's interesting because I know I get the morbid thing, but for the last several years of my career, I was the medical director of an inpatient hospice facility, and the atmosphere was anything but morbid. I mean, yes, the funeral directors came often, but so when I started practicing oncology, it really wasn't very long until I became more and more interested in what happened with my patients as their treatment stopped working. And this was back in the 80s, and the treatments didn't work very well. So I started volunteering with a local hospice agency as a part-time medical director, and just found an interest, maybe a calling, I don't know. But this part, the relationships with the patients and what they were going through, making home visits, seeing people in their own environments, talking with the kids, petting the dogs, you really learn things about people, and they really are able to open up. So for me, it was fascinating and educational and inspiring. I was fortunate to be able to eventually transition first to hospital-based palliative care and then to home-based hospice care. It fills my soul. The conversations at the bedside, they're honest, they're intensely human.
Yes. Are you still doing that work?
I have retired. And I was doing some part-time consulting for a while, but now I've cut the cords. Yes.
Right. Well, I know in our culture, people have a real problem with death or talking about death, or if somebody says something, oh, don't say that, don't, they're like, no. And it's something that everyone is going to experience, and some lives are longer than others. And so do you notice that people really shy away from it, or it's kind of still taboo?
Absolutely. And but you're right. I mean, it's universal. Nobody gets out of here alive. Mm-hmm. And dying is probably the most important thing you will do as a person outside of being born. But I've really watched and tried to understand what it is, the distaste or the avoidance. People have said that Americans are a death-denying society. Well, I'm not sure about that. We love watching movies about people dying. Somebody pointed out to me that most of the Disney princesses have experienced loss of one way or another. So that we love it in somebody else, but not in ourselves. Right. I do think there's a piece of it that's particularly true for Americans is that it is not under our control. We, as Americans, love that pioneer spirit, that entrepreneur, self-made person. that can, is the master of their own fate. And dying doesn't play by those rules. We can. I'm hoping that more and more people will take that control idea and apply it to those last weeks and months of their life, and think about it ahead and plan for it ahead. But I think that we're afraid of it because we're uncertain and we can't control it. Yeah.
Yes, and I've read and heard about different people who have had cancer or a disease and then they died peacefully. And I hadn't seen that. My father died of cancer. His brother died of cancer, and I've had friends, and it was not peaceful. It was horrific and so painful and so miserable. Even with the drugs, he's just like, I'm so miserable. And I think that's what we are afraid of is maybe not dying, but how is it going to happen? And that dreaded C word, and are we going to have some dreaded disease that's going to drag out and be horrible?
You really did hit on something there, because for healthy people, we tend to have this vague fear or distaste for death. But for people who are ill and are getting closer to that, it becomes the fears become more specific and more tangible. It is fear of uncontrolled pain. It is fear of lack of dignity, of loss of function. It's fear of, am I going to stink and people won't want to come and visit me? It's fear of loneliness, and so it's the fear of that last period. You're right, and over and over, people in hospice patients told me, I'm not scared of dying, but just don't let me suffer.
Yeah, and you tell some stories of different people, different patients in your book, and there was one about this man he had some cancer in the face, and it was degenerating, and you could smell it from, out before you get in his house, you said. It was so bad. But he seemed to have a positive outlook or something. He was just going along, that was interesting.
It was an amazing experience for all of us who met him, because the idea, it was hideous. It was absolutely hideous, but it was not undignified, because he was who he was until he died. And I don't think he suffered much at all. Mm-hmm. I don't know about his pain, but I don't think he suffered much until the very end, where I know he had to. He wasn't able to manage the last days by himself, and because he lived by himself. Right. He had to move to a hospice inpatient facility, and I think that hurt. I think that not being able to complete his life on his own hurt.
And when we say hospice, some people aren't sure what that is. They think it's a place. We go to hospice, but isn't it a service? I mean, it's kind of explain what it is.
So hospice is really a model of care that in the United States, the hospice is defined pretty much by the Medicare hospice benefit that was enacted back in the 1980s. And it's a model of care for people who have a survival prognosis of 6 months or less. And the point is management of symptoms, relief of suffering, multidisciplinary involvement, including the social work and the spiritual care and the nursing assistants and the bereavement coordinators, energy therapies often. So it's really a model of care. There are two criteria. One is the terminal prognosis, and the other is that you have to choose it. And choosing hospice care in the United States means that you give up something. That for the person with cancer, that usually means, okay, I'm not taking that next chemotherapy cycle. Or the person with heart failure decides, I'm not going into the hospital the next time my failure gets worse, or I'm going to take myself off the transplant list to decide I'm going to focus on my quality of life, managing my symptoms, and managing the last part of my life the way I want it to be.
Mm-hmm. There was a story in your book about a woman who the doctors had told her that she had cancer, and she was in hospice and she didn't have cancer, and yeah, and she was there for like a year or something and put herself into this expensive, facility, and then her money ran out and she was still alive, and she's like, you don't have cancer.
Yeah, that's an oops. The hospice graduations happen, and because the determination of prognosis requires two docs, but we can both be wrong.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
and what I'm really curious about, and I'm sure my viewers are, is for example, when my uncle was at home and dying of cancer, he had told my aunt, he says, "Oh, my mom was here. She was here to see me." And so we hear a lot about people coming in, the spirits, family members who have passed over, angels, guides coming in the room. And even I think, wasn't it, who invented the Apple computer?
Steve Jobs.
Steve Jobs, his last words were he looked up and said, "Wow, wow, wow." I guess those were his last words. So what is your experience with this?
Well, this is interesting because, of course, I've not died, so I don't have any personal experience. Yeah, no, I understand. I understand. But in being a witness, so things certainly happen. What they mean and what they are, I don't know. Mm-hmm. It is very common for people to experience something that, well, in the hospice jargon, we call visioning, where they seem to be seeing something welcoming or seeing someone welcoming, or will report, as your family member did, that they were here or they are here right now. There's no doubt that people experience some things that other people right next to them in the room are not experiencing. I have maintained a strict "I don't know" approach because I don't know. I don't know. I know what I like to think and what I like to believe, but I guess I don't know. But what I do know is that if someone is experiencing something that seems welcoming and seems pleasant and seems peaceful, then I can't do better than that. And if somebody's there, if there's a presence there, that's great. If there's not, that's great. The person is in a very good place as their life is ending. So I think that's great. Yeah.
Right. And I'm fascinated about the near-death stuff and Dr. Raymond Moody's work and all of that. It's fascinating to me.
It's huge. And the stories, I've heard the stories, and I hope that there's something like that, because I wouldn't mind experiencing something like that.
Right.
When my father died, the first time, he had a cardiac arrest and was resuscitated, and my sister, as he was on a ventilator, unresponsive in the hospital, said, "I can't wait till Dad wakes up so he can tell us what he saw." Yeah. And he didn't see anything. He didn't remember anything. So it's not universal. Yeah. Sometimes people seem to be experiencing some things that are not pleasant, and that we don't seem to be able to figure out if it's the drug side effect or intolerable pain. I have to believe that sometimes that agitation, that apparent suffering at the end of life, is they're experiencing something they don't like. Either there's something that, I'm not talking about hounds of hell here necessarily, but maybe I'm seeing something wonderful, but I'm not ready to go. Mm-hmm. Or how in God's green earth are you there? That kind of thing. So I don't know what's going on.
I'm sure there's a lot. And then it's fascinating when they leave the body and then come back, and then they say, well, they're out, or they're being operated on, or their heart stops, and then they describe doctors or something that happened outside before. And it's fascinating. Yes.
It's fascinating. It's fascinating.
Absolutely. So I wanted to ask about, we have COVID now, and I think people are very, it's made people more aware of their own mortality. And how can people begin to plan for, the last parts of their life, or because we just never know, we could get hit with something. I mean, even with the flu, we have a lot of people dying. People die every day of, you never know what. But I think with COVID, this past year, it's made people a little more aware, just what's going on,
Right. That there's no doubt COVID has, I think, done a couple of things, and that's one of them, is to increase awareness of mortality, at least for those of us that believe the science. I'm sorry, I'm not going to go there. That it isn't only old, frail people, that young, healthy people have died, and the other thing that COVID has done is that dying from COVID means dying alone. If you're in an institution, if you're in the hospital, your visitors are strictly limited. If you're in a nursing home, your visitors are strictly limited. If you're able to be at home, who is your caretaker going to be? Your caregiver. Mm-hmm. Commonly, we think of family members being primary caregivers, but do you really want your daughter, who has 2 elementary school-age kids, to be your caregiver and risk getting sick herself? Mm-hmm. I think that those kinds of questions have complicated the picture. Now, so how does one plan? Well, there's some check-off things to do. Do you have a will or an estate plan for your stuff? Have you thought about funeral expenses or what you'd like to do? Do you have advance directives? And in every state in the country, there's some form of living will or healthcare proxy, durable power of attorney for healthcare. Many states have other documents, pre-planning documents that can be enacted. So just getting the paperwork done is one of the first things you can do. But the other piece is a bit of preparation that makes that filling out the paperwork more useful. And that is to just think about it and recognize your own mortality. To experience, if that makes you sad, then go with the sadness and see what that sadness is telling you. If it makes you angry, figure out what that is that makes you angry and then do something about it. That's one of the reasons that I wrote the book, is because I'm convinced that we would do so much better at the end of life if we honestly knew that we were mortal. Now, you're right. We don't control everything. Yeah. Sometimes a drive-by shooting, takes care of your plans. There's just, you don't get everything. You can't control everything. Mm-hmm. But
I know, everyone would love to just die in our sleep or drop dead, that would be.
Right. I'm going to put a plug in for, it's a friend. Her name is Tracy Lind, Lind. And Tracy has a dementing illness, a slowly progressive dementing illness. And she has taken on as her cause addressing the issues of dying in people with dementing illnesses, using herself as an example. So I would encourage folks to check her out. Yes.
Yeah. What is her name?
So it's Tracy, Tracey, Lind, Lind. I'm sorry, I don't have any of the contact information with me right this minute.
Look it up.
Yeah, you can look her up.
Yeah.
She's got a there's a title for her work, but I don't remember what it is. But you can Google her, you'll find her. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So in your book, Dying with Ease, you say that a vital part of a good death is the closing of relationships. Can you just explain a little bit about that? That's just like so hard. And I think about, I can't die while my mom's still alive or my dog is still alive. Because it would be too hard for them. Like I was in an airplane last week and there was real big turbulence, and I'm just like, please, God, Archangel Michael, I'm calling in everybody. I can't die now. I can't die yet. Please. Right. That's I'm just trying to stay alive long enough so that those two beings won't be, devastated.
No, I think relationships are gigantic. both the closing of them, if you can, but the healing of them also. To heal the relationship with others, your relationship with the transcendent, and your relationship with yourself. I think that those are gigantic in getting rid of the distress that prevents a easeful, peaceful death. And sometimes those are tough conversations you have to have if there's an estrangement. And that's one reason that doing some of this work ahead of time is advisable, because if you wait till you're going to be dead in 2 weeks, you don't have the energy or the time to do the work of healing and closing those difficult relationships.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. So now, are you just, working, you have your book? Are you doing any other kind of work, or completely retired, or are you writing blogs, or what are you doing?
So I am blogging, and I'm publicizing the book right now. I'm more than playing with. I'm researching, at least, another book on that looks more at the intersection of spirituality and end of life, because I think that's a gigantic piece. There's a lot out there. We've been dying and being spiritual for millennia, and we're just now learning about memories or thoughts of people. This is a fascinating thing to me. The family sitting around the bedside of the dying person, while the person is dying, they tend to be talking to each other and and talking about the dying person. When the person has died, they talk to the person.
Yeah.
The person who science would say is no longer there, but clearly is there, because there's a conversation going on with them. Yeah.
Right. And I always think, and if it's, which I do believe, because of my experiences and things with, other spirits, but of course I believe that we're going on, but if we didn't, then we wouldn't know about it anyway. I mean, it would be like, what,
it doesn't hurt to
matter.
Right.
But it also feels a little exhausting, like, oh, we live forever, we keep having to incarnate, or we're doing stuff. Isn't that exhausting? Like, never, forever and ever and ever, we're doing, so it's just fascinating. The whole thing is absolutely fascinating.
It is. It is fascinating. And you're right. I guess that doing it forever and ever, that's why the Buddhists call it suffering, feel of samsara. It's suffering. It's because, for crying out loud.
Yeah, we don't want to keep reincarnating and doing this, especially on Earth. This Earth school is a pretty tough place, kicks our butts.
Right.
Well, Dr. Spiess, thank you so much for joining me on Cosmic Conversations. This has been absolutely fascinating. And everybody check out his book, Dying with Ease. And your website's flashing up on the screen, so everybody check it out, and leave some comments below on your experiences with family members or friends who have passed away, and have you had any near-death experiences? Have your family members said that they saw anybody come to greet them? I'd love to hear your experiences, and until next time, much love, everybody.